And we're adjusting. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. It's time for morning motivation. So right off the bat, get those projects done. I know it's early in the morning and it's a school day or a work day and work week. And so it gets harder to do. So a lot of times guys have to come after work and then work in their garage or work in the shop, and they come home from work and then they do more work. And while that doesn't seem like it's very enticing to a lot of people, that's the reality for a lot of people, is that they have that sort of motivation. They have that sort of dedication and desire to get the thing that they want to build, their cool car, their boat, the truck, whatever it is, and get it done. And that's actually how it happens. Is you don't get to just sit on the couch and go, man, I wish I had a really cool car. When you have a cool car sitting in the garage, well, you have parts of a cool car or truck or boat or whatever it is, a motorcycle, a Trail 90 sitting in the garage that just needs work done on it to become a real cool car. And you need to go make that happen. So there's that, and then there's you, and then there's you working on that and getting it done. And that's how it happens. Even if it's just a little bit at a time, the more that you do, the more you'll want to do. And just like working out or anything else, you'll get used to it and you'll feel better about it. And then you'll feel bad if you don't do it, which is good also. So make sure you get out there and get some stuff done. Today, we're going to talk about boost, one of my favorite subjects, and it's something that we cover a lot on the channel because everything that we put on the dyno, we want to run boost on because, as we know, boost makes everything better. The thumbnail that I have up is a supercharged, Vortex supercharged. This one had a Mondo XX blower or something on it. And it was a 540-inch Dart SHP short block. So it was low compression. It was like 8-to-1. It had good heads on it. It had Dart 335 heads on it. So it was a low compression Dart deal and made good power. We ended up making, right before we ran this, I think we ran it with a tunnel ram, but like a Wyand tunnel ram, and two 750s. It has a good size cam in it. It has like a 272, 280 something cam in it. Getting near 800 lift, 760 or 770. I'd have to look up the specs and see if I remember right. But it shows a couple things. One, first of all, it shows you can run these big cams, the ones that you can only run with high compression. You can also run them with low compression. And guess what? It works just fine. The compression basically is just an additive thing, just like boost is. So if you run a motor like this 540 with this cam, it still works and wants to make power at high RPM because that's what that cam does. It has lift, it has duration, it has everything it does to make power. It will just make more power with duration or make more power with more compression. But any camshaft will also do that. So now, no matter what camshaft you put in there, it will work better with more duration, or it will make more power with more duration, or make more power with more compression, because the compression basically just adds power everywhere. So if you go from 8-to-1 to 10-to-1, it just gains power everywhere. And in that range at a rate of 3 to 4% per full point of change in compression. And it doesn't gain more with one kind of cam than another. That's about the rate that it gains. The reason that people like putting higher static compression, or they combine higher static compression with really big camshafts with lots of overlap and lots of duration, lots of lift, is that those cams tend to shift power higher in the RPM range. And so they lose power down low. Compression helps bring some of that back, but technically speaking, it brings it back everywhere, not just there. There is more there, but there's also more at the top because compression adds it everywhere. And what we did was using that's a perfect combination. Lots of high RPM power, big displacement. That's a perfect combination for putting a centrifugal supercharger on, because the motor was already making pretty good power. Like I said, 775 or something NA, and then which is good for a low compression motor with a big camshaft in it. We ran the Vortex on it, and as a blow through we ran race gas on it, but we blowing through with the Mondo blower and the CSU 850 blow through carburetor. And this thing made over 1,200 horsepower. And it did it like on the first pull. It was like, hey, look, I came to party, man. Let's go. Let's get going. So seeing those kinds of gains, if you've ever done any testing or development on naturally aspirated motors, especially as you get, like when I was doing the stuff for Engine Masters, when you start getting to where you're making lots of power and you have a very high specific output. We were near 1.6 or so horsepower per cubic inch. So it was pretty good. But once you start getting up in higher in the specific outputs, power gets harder and harder to come by. So you're looking for littler gains. When you add boost to something, if you add like 7.5 pounds, man, you're going to get a gain of 40 or 50% in power. You'll notice that. You'll see like on the graph. To me, I look at the graph and go, "Oh, look at that! Look at that! That's a big area in there that we just filled in with extra power." And you're like, "That's going to be a lot of fun on the street." And obviously 1,200 horsepower. You know, I know people are driving around with stuff like that, but that's like a ridiculous amount of power. But you can always only use part of it if you need to do that, because traction or common sense dictates that you probably should do that. But 1,200 horsepower is an amazing amount, and it's also so easy to get. I mean, this was not a dedicated race motor build by any means. It was a SHP short block that anybody could buy. It had off-the-shelf Dart 335 Pro 1 heads on it. This camshaft was an off-the-shelf camshaft. In fact, it came off the shelf at Westech. It was even a 4.7 swap cam, if I remember right. And all I was looking at was, oh, look, that roller cam has lots of duration. That's a big cam. Let's put that in. It wasn't chosen because we scienced out the lift and duration and valve events and everything. And we ran the same magic cam. We ran it NA. We ran it with a turbo. We ran it with nitrous. We ran it with a centrifugal supercharger. We ran it with a roots blower. I take that back. I don't think we ran it with turbos on that motor. I don't ever remember running turbos on that Dart version. We did it on the 540 from Blueprint, but not on this one. So we ran a roots blower, a centrifugal blower, nitrous, tunnel ram, single 4-barrel. I think that's it. But guess what? It worked on all of those. and it was low compression. So it worked with all of that stuff, because a cam is really just a cam. But when you add boost to the equation, like I said, this thing was revving out fairly high here. Let's see what RPM were we running on this thing. So we made 1,200. This thing was making good power. I'm going to take a look and see. Pictures, big block, supercharged, Vortec big block. So we ran this thing out to 7,000 RPM, which is where it made peak power. Peak torque occurred at like 6,500. It was still making over 600 foot-pounds, down at 650 foot-pounds, down at 3,500, and ended up making 950 or so foot-pounds of torque. So it did very well. It was pretty stout. And when it was NA, it made 775 or so, and 675 or 80 foot-pounds of torque. So it did fairly well. It was making good power, and it would be a good curve, and it certainly would be fun and traction limited for if you had this in a Camaro or a Chevelle or a truck, or anything that you would be out having fun with. But it was a fairly serious deal, and at low compression, and with this big of a camshaft, you certainly could run this thing on pump gas. It would definitely be. I don't think that we did, because we were scared. I needed to be held when we're making 1,200 horsepower. But this thing probably would be able to run on pump gas. It worked out really well. Dan, yeah, it is cold outside, or it was this morning. We have frost on the grass, and the truck is all iced over and stuff. So it is pretty chilly. But you know what that means? That's boost weather. It's just that the tires have no traction on the cold ground either. So the upshot of all this is I highly recommend boost for every application. So whatever you have, your thing should be thinking. And the reason for that, you should be thinking boost, but the reason for that is because of the gains that you get. So even if you have a mild 250 or 300 horsepower small block Ford or small block Chevy or small block Dodge, a 318 or a Magnum or whatever it is, and you add boost to it, you're going to get such a huge gain. those first gains that you get going from a stock motor. So if you put heads, cam, and intake on a stock motor, you usually can gain pretty good power gains. You put a set of airflow research heads or trick flow heads or dart heads or whatever they are on some sort of small block. You put a cam in it, you put an intake manifold on it. We've shown these many times, like on the Ford, you'll go from 250 to up near 400. So you'll get good gains. But if you just add boost to the stock one, you can get that also. Then if you add boost to the modified one, then you get even more because the number that you're multiplying means that the gains you get per pound of boost are even greater. So all of that is good stuff. So the end result is make sure that if you have something, you should be thinking boost, because those are going to be the biggest gains that you can get. And after a while, certainly it's going to be less expensive too, because even if you just put cams and things, like with the LS is obviously a perfect example, but even if you just put a cam in a small block Ford and then put boost on it, you're going to, obviously good things are going to happen. Did you hear about the guy in Washington State getting stopped for doing 192? No, that's pretty fast. We have snow here in Illinois. Motivation has been drowned by pain. That's not good. He had no thoughts. We don't have any thoughts. 671 is a 2-stroke and has a blower and a turbo. I want to shop with a radiant heat floor. I hate this time of year. It is hard to get motivated. I did like that when I took a trip back to Buffalo, New York, and the shop that I was at had a radiant heat from I guess they plumb it through the slab when they lay that, and it was nice. It just made me want to lay on the ground though and go to sleep. Do you know if there's a power loss using your filters on turbos on the street? There can be, depending on what the flow rate of the filter is, but you can make them big enough where there's no loss. Michael, I hate to admit it, but I've been absent on the live feed the past few days. Kind of went through a draw. Comments like boost weather. What causes timing to show on the ground strap? You mean what changes? What changes where it shows? Is that what you're asking? Pip, do you know if there's a power loss using filters on turbos on street strip LM7? On a street strip one, on a street vehicle, I would definitely have a filter on it. You shouldn't have an open turbo. You shouldn't be ingesting dirt into your motor. That's not good. If you wanted to do it and you had a big bell mouth entry like we talked about the other day, where air was ramming in and you're trying to maximize all the airflow through that turbo by force feeding it, that's all good for racing. That's not good for longevity in street. It's not good for the turbo, and it's also not good for the motor. So a filter is a good idea. You just have to make sure that, like when we ran Bonneville, we had a 4-inch turbo with 4-inch ducting going into our turbo. The ducting wrapped around the radiator support, and then position the filter in a pressurized environment in front of the radiator. But we also had a K&N that was like, about this long, and it was gigantic. So it didn't restrict the motor, and that motor was making 500 or so at the tire, 550 at the tire, the way that we ran it at Bonneville. Yeah, feel the heat, Tim. I gain 1 pound of boost from going from an air filter to a turbo guard, but it's not you can't state that as a universal thing. It's not just filter versus this other thing. It's that filter versus whatever other thing that you're testing. So the filters are not universally bad. It's just restrictive filters restrict and non-restrictive filters don't restrict. I know we're lucky. One of the things about this house that I like is that, and Lisa loves it, is that right outside the shower, we have the little heat lamps. So you can, when you transition into the cold and come out of the shower, at least it's nice, like when you get out. Stock 4.8 twin 72s making 40 pounds, 1,400 of the tire. Twin 72s should support that. Whether or not it's going to be at 40 pounds is going to be determined by, that seems like a lot of boost. So you're not going to be making 700. Yeah, that might be close. Well, are you not making very much NA then? I'm thinking if you have a good cam and stuff in the 4.8, it's probably going to be closer to 30 than 40. Karlov, yes, boost is awesome. Have to go back to work. Well, good. We're glad you dropped in. Car went 5.0. So that's at the 8th mile. So if it went 5.0, I'm sure you want it to be 4.99, right? And see, Karlov knows what's up. Hit the like button while he was here, just hanging out. Hit the like, share, subscribe button, all of that. Richard, is there any benefit to a larger diameter intake tubing size over the size of the turbo inlet or the turbo discharge? Having more airflow going into the turbo is better. So if you're talking about that, then yes, there is a benefit to a radius entry or a bigger air tube going into the turbo. But you're going to, if it's bigger than the inlet of the turbo, you're going to have to neck that down. And so you have to make sure that that transition is good. If you're talking about a bigger discharge tube, yes, you can allow the air to expand after you go out of it. And then also the flow rate through the intercooler core, because you want the flow rate through the system after the turbo into the throttle body to be as unrestricted as you can. But that doesn't mean you just keep going up in size, because there are diminishing returns for that too. We normally run 3-inch, or on some of the bigger stuff, I think we have 3-inch in and 3.5 out, or 3.5 in and then 4-inch out for some of the bigger stuff. Boostage. So we have to have a pole. Okay, so we'll see if people were paying attention. Does a big cam, meaning like lots of lift and lots of duration, require high compression? Remember, every cam is a cam. Who's going to Mega Cache Days? Where are they running that at? Had a few people testing here in Arizona on their way. Where's Mega Cache Days? Do I have an opinion on snake eater injectors? I've only used one set, and the ones that I have worked good. Salvador, why would you? Oh, on the inlet side, you want it to be longer in length. You want it to be bigger in diameter if it's longer. Looking to build a tow rig, LQ4, 4L80. What turbo size range should I be looking at? How much power are you trying to make out of it? A GT45 would be a good tow. Well, I don't know. I think I would go with something even bigger than that on a 6-liter. It would be very responsive, but I'd be worried about the back pressure. But if you're only running 7 pounds, it's probably going to work fine. It's in Chuckwalla. I would like to catch some Chuckwallas. I saw someone install a tube from cold air to the cabin so they could hear their blower better. 500 to 600. Yeah, a GT45 would be good for that. Good responsive power. And that's what it will be. A GT45 on a 6-liter is going to be fine. If you're trying to max out the GT45, you're going to get to the limit of the hot side of the GT45 before you will the cold side. But for something like that, it's going to be good, especially if I'm hoping that it's a cammed 6-liter. Are there any horsepower gains between a V7 YSI and a V7 YSI-B? I don't know. I'd have to look at the maps on them to see. Oh, Trek Norris cam. That'll be good. That'll be a good tow thing. Or training upgrades a must. Obviously not a must. I like them for, most of the motors that I get from the wrecking yard are high mileage deals. So if I was going to put one of those in a vehicle that already had 300,000 or 400,000 miles on it, a trunnion upgrade is not a bad idea. If nothing else, just because the rockers tend to wear out. To get the most out of the bigger cam, raise the compression. Raising the compression will work on a smaller cam too. It works on every cam, not just a bigger one. Perfect timing. Live stream for my 12-hour Monday. Yeah, they're like that. So I have a couple, and this is a request for people. If you guys are at work or whatever at your shop, I have a couple of guys now that have been contacting me, and what they do is they run the channel on at their work, and they just let it loop. And obviously, that's good for me because the more views it gets, the more I get paid for it. So it works out good. But they just have it on the background, just going while they're doing their stuff. Would love an in-depth tuning. So if you have the ability to do that, please support the channel by doing that. Would love an in-depth tuning guide for us basic builder guys. I have lots of tuning information up on the channel where I show you what happens when you have too little or too much time. Too much timing is it breaks, but too little timing, I show you what happens. And then the same thing with air fuel, but not how to tune specifically though, because the problem is that that's going to be application specific. Trigger happy. I do that also. Thank you very much for your support. So where are we at? Does a big cam require high compression? 72% saying no and 28% saying yes. Kyle, my favorite motor always is the next one that I run. I've listened to hours and hours lately while working. I hope you're not getting tired of listening to me talk. Both my job and my workplace. Thank you very much. That's very helpful. So if we could just get like 8 or 10 million people to do that, that would be awesome. Trying to get some ideas of factory air box of some sort that I can adapt and mount on the inner bedside of an 8-foot 95 Silverado. Want a common size filter. Is this Michael, is this going to be a turbo deal? If it is, maybe think about doing, attaching 2 of them together and then having 2 filter elements in it. Otherwise, we just use a big cone filter. If it has low compression, just feed it more nitrous. Yep. Yeah, Dan, that's what I was talking about. Dan said taking the big cam with low compression thing to extreme is NHRA Super Stockers ran 280 plus duration cams and 750 lift stuff with 8.5 to 1. That's what I was talking about with this big block. The big block that's in the thumbnail is an 8 to 1 motor that had a high 270s, high 280s solid roller camshaft in it with 750 to 800 lift. It's a, it's a big cam basically, but run with low compression, and yet it still it still makes lots of power and runs at the RPM like a cam does, because the cam actually does not know what the compression is. It doesn't have any idea. It just does what the cam does. The compression is just going to add power basically everywhere, as we've gone over many times. James, Richard, what junkyards do you go to? The one that I frequent the most often is the one that's right around the corner on Milliken from West Tech down in Miraloma. But I've gone to other ones that are in that area, depending on what we're looking for. A rear mount GT45, that will work. Blueprint engine says, Blueprint engine say finally 540 power adders will be shipped around the 19th. I ordered one after a video. That was a good motor. We did a lot of stuff to that. That thing worked good. Does high compression require a big cam? No, but it requires the right amount of cam and displace, or not compression. And wait, what am I talking about? Oh, it requires the right amount of timing and octane. Best way to watch is loop the playlist. There you go. Just for finish rebuilding an L33 Trek Norris cam. We know what that does. We got lots of videos on that. 1,000 miles into the break-in, lost all oil pressure. Lifter started tapping very loud, so shut it off immediately. What are the odds? The O-ring pinched. The O-ring in the pickup tube? That would seem odd after a cam change. You did a full rebuild? Okay, not just the cam swap. See, that's why you don't touch that other stuff. You just put the cam in. Summit high volume pump. So why did you put a Summit high volume pump on there? I'm just curious. Cam retaining plate. I haven't ever had a cam retaining plate be bad. We have had O-rings though break or pinch, and especially if you're taking them out and putting them back in. Always make sure lubricate the O-ring before you put it back in, and make sure we do that. We put oil on the receiver for the oil pump as well, because if you try to, if it's not there, it's like trying to put the O-rings for the injectors in. Also, some of the stuff, like particularly some of the Holley intake manifolds, has really sharp edges, so you try to put them in, it'll just tear the O-ring. My dad wouldn't let me put the stocker in, yeah. And if it's an old timer guy from back in the day, and especially if he was working on small blocks and stuff, then you put high volume oil pumps in everything. Richard, I have a 6-liter sloppy stage 2, 80 millimeter turbo. Should I run a high volume, high pressure oil pump? People go both ways. I honestly don't think it's going to make any difference either way. Is high compression a good idea for a thumper line of cams? I mean, high compression adds power everywhere, no matter what camshaft you have in. So if you want more power, high compression will do that. The cam doesn't require that. It will run with any static compression. So we're at 76% no, saying it does not require it, and 24% saying yes. 70 pounds at 6,000 is good. That's fine. Yeah. And especially when they're cold, the factory pumps will be higher, but not because the pump is so great, but the bearing clearances are fairly tight on a factory LS. Then when it warms up, but we normally see a rising oil pressure curve when we're running these on the dyno. But admittedly, we don't ever get the motor nearly as hot or the oil as hot as you would when you're racing it around. Took my truck around the block last night, first time in a year. It feels strong, but need to hook up the defrost. Yeah, that's a heater is like a critical element. And there's nothing better than when it's cold out having your vehicle warm up, and I just drive around with the heat on just full blast. I like the summer much better than I like the winter. I like the hot much more than I like the cold. But there's nothing that gets as warm as the inside of your vehicle. What else besides spinning a rod or main bearing or oil pickup O-ring would cause 0 to 5 psi oil pressure? Is the thing still running? Like you haven't pushed the lifter out or anything, or broke a push rod or a rocker or something like that? Those are the main things. Obviously, if you have a clog somewhere, that would be bad. Maybe you could have something happen to the. No, I don't think the filter's going to do anything there. You could, the barbell could be damaged, or there's a freeze plug in the front behind the timing cover that's immediately after it's in the passage, the feed passage from the oil pump to the rest of the motor. If that's come out or leaking, that could be a problem. Stuck pressure relief valve, maybe. Just really loud lifters. Yeah, I definitely take it apart and try to look at that stuff. I have an LQ4 with a TSP 224 cam. There's such a thing as too much compression. I was thinking about 706 heads. An LQ4 is not going to have too much compression. An LQ9 with a 706 head, the compression is going to be fairly high. But it's just a function of compression and cam timing, because you have static compression and dynamic compression, and then available octane. The higher the compression is, you have a fairly decent sized camshaft in it, so that helps. But you have to have enough octane, or you have to take timing out of it. Yeah, Jeremy, it's 10 pounds. The rule of thumb is 10 pounds per 1,000 RPM. But lots of racing engines don't do that. You don't need extra bearing clearances. Pressure relief valve could be stuck open with a sliver of metal. Try tapping on it. Tappy tap. So has anybody seen, I'm going to go ahead and take a look here. I want to do an oiling system upgrade, but I thought that I did it. I thought that I did the one that I used when I did the Engine Masters deal on the 351. Oiling. Let's talk tech power. So there's a tech talk on how to do that. Look forward. Power from oiling. I'm not seeing the regular video. I'm wondering, it seems weird that I have a bunch of videos that seem to have gone missing. And I'm not sure why. I have an 03 Silverado LQ4, 197,000. No matter what speed I'm going, it has between 38 to 42 PSI. I'm in danger of blowing the motor. No, probably not. But try changing your oil and see what happens. Any interest in testing an 8-to-1 header? It would be really hard to do on the engine dyno, because the engine dyno all of the stuff is right behind the motor where an 8-into-1 goes. So it'd have to go forward and then with a U-bend. And I think probably an 8-to-1 header is going to be mostly sound quality, which it would sound cool. But I don't think we would see much in terms of power. But it'd still be interesting. Salvador, oh, he wants to know if it's when it's running, does it look aerated? The Osman, you don't really want to run a 23 thousandths head gasket, especially if the piston's out of the hole by 8 or 10 thousandths. That's not enough piston to head clearance. Then deck the head. Yeah, you don't. You should just put LQ9 pistons in it. Going to pull the pan to check for material. There you go. And check the filter too. Take the filter, cut the filter apart. Wiggle test on the rod bearings before you pull the caps. Just see if there's lots of movement in there. That will tell you, give you an idea. Although if you have a wiggle test that fails and it's got a lot of clearance and the bearing's eaten up, you're going to see that in the oil. You're going to see it'll be all metal flaky. I use 1030 synthetic and it's new oil. The oil pressure should go up with RPM. That's how those gerotor pumps work. Fresh bearings. Well, hopefully that's it, because having no oil pressure tends to it can eat the bearings. So you'll want to check and see. But look and see. I mean, we take the filters and cut them apart. Look in the filter elements. Look at the bottom. If there's material in it, and if there's material in the element, there's also going to be material at the bottom of the filter. When you cut it, you slide it off. And usually when we drain the oil, you can see it. Oh, you're like, oh yeah, that's metal flake. That's not good. It's all shiny. It's not supposed to be shiny. And especially if the oil is new. If the oil is new and clean, you can certainly see it. Mexico City's in the house. James, try putting a thicker oil in it next time you do an oil change and see what happens. You can also add air pressure to the oil sender fitting at the driver's side rear of the block. Listen to where there's a big leak. If the pan and front cover are off, you'll for sure hear it. They were fresh, sir. 72% saying no. Does a big cam require high compression? 28% saying yes. We're still at 72 and 28. Seven deuce. So it looks like I'm going to have to redo the oil pan test. So what we did on the Engine Masters motor is, obviously, since we were looking for power everywhere, is we changed the oil pan and the pan had a kick out and an integrated windage tray. The one thing I didn't do, which I should have done, was also a crank scraper, because you're looking for every little bit. And I didn't pay enough attention to oil drain back either. I think on that motor, I think that there's probably some more power to be had there. Did you have to Mike Tyson anybody on the flight today? I didn't have any flights. Yeah, crank scrapers definitely work. And for mine, I would have just cut it out with tin snips because that's how I roll. I'm gonna do that on the. I want to do that on the 2.2 Dodge. I also want to make a kick out pan for it. I'm gonna weld one up because I don't do enough welding, and I want to learn to be better at welding. And the best way to do that is to do it. I mean, I can stick stuff together, but I want to make a. I'm gonna take a stock pan and make it into a Super Richie race pan. So I'll have a. I'm gonna have to. It'll be a little bit of work. I'm going to see if I can get a windage tray to either bolt to the main caps, or if I have to integrate it into the pan, that will also work. But the other thing I want to do is I want to have a kick out pan. So when the oil is being grabbed and slung around, this probably be even more beneficial on a 2.5. So it's being slung around. The oil comes up and basically sloshes into this edge and hits the edge, and then all drains back all nice. It doesn't keep going around. Wood welding is the best, with plastic welding being second. Bondo and paint. What I do is, well, especially for things that have to hold air or water or oil, is I'll go in and weld it, and then because I'm MIG welding and not TIG welding, and then if there are holes in it, I'll just go on the inside and apply silicone on the inside edge. Then it's fixed. Certified JB welder. Yeah, I would like to learn TIG welding because I would like to do aluminum. More of the things that I do that I think are cool are aluminum based than steel. But I do a lot of exhaust things and brackets and things like that are fairly easy. The 396 is going well. The block is painted, the front cover's painted, the pan's painted, the heads are painted. And so now I need to get all the overspray off that's on there when I didn't tape everything. Because I just had a window of opening where it was nice outside, and I'm like, I'm gonna make this happen. And I just held my piece of cardboard to cover it, and that didn't work as well as I wanted it to. And none of the stuff that I do is strength based. It's not, none of it's necessary. I'm not relying on, like, I'm not welding a cage up or anything like that. Try a dry sump. I don't want to do a dry sump, mostly for expense, because none of the 2.2 or 2.5 guys would be doing dry sump. It's not on a car like that. It would be cool and it would make power, I'm certain, but this is, and if I'm showing them what to do, then it'll be helpful. I have one of the old cheapy TIGs at home, works great. Added a water cooled torch so I can weld nonstop without burning my hands. That's good. I have a 110 hot box in my storage that I could use. That my buddy Bernie did most of the welding with that back in the day. He did a lot of stuff with that. But I want to be able to bend up the metal, and because the kick out doesn't have to be super elaborate, and I already have ones to look at that I could kind of emulate. Do main girdles work? Yes, they do. They can stop the caps from moving around. I went to school to learn how to TIG. Well worth the time and expense. Having an instructor looking over your shoulder helps tremendously. What I found with the MIG welding is that the setup is really the thing. The rest of it I kind of get. I mean, I have a pretty good feel for that, but getting the settings right and understanding that is that's what I'm working on. Love the content as always. You think internal balancing is worth the money versus factory builds? And I wouldn't rebalance a factory assembly to try to get any power out of it. If you're building a dedicated race motor, those are normally going to be internally balanced, but I wouldn't rebalance anything that you already have. Yeah, Dan, I'm not. We have. I think Westech has a TIG, and I would just learn to do it there. I would. It's not something I would have at my house, and not something that I would buy. I just wouldn't use it enough. I'm not there. I have something that I want to build, and I'm hoping that I can make it all together. We'll see. And it's not something that's going to be critical if I don't do a great job. What is your best video regarding the selection of turbos matching the engine you want to put it in? I don't have one where I've done a video on matching the turbo, because you don't match the turbo to the engine, you match the turbo to your desired power output. So that's the first thing. When you're selecting a turbo, what power do I need to make? And then now what am I using to make that power? Like, what's my NA motor? So what's my NA power output? And then with that information, you can choose the turbo that you need to make to do what you want it to do. Exactly. Big house. He needs one for home. I don't do much work here. You need beer and friends that know how to TIG. I have that. I have guys that certainly can instruct me. My buddy Bernie's really, really good. So that's not a problem. And or I could just go see Dan. Richard, I've used high temp engine paint in the lifter valley. Yeah, I've done that too. Just make sure that there are no use acetone to get all the oil out and stuff. But you need to practice at home. Yep. I could just do that up here. I could just bring it all up here, and I could just be TIG welding while I'm doing live feeds, right? I've seen you talk about efficiency of the turbo in relation to the engine it's on. Yeah, because that's why you have to know the NA power output. You have to know the NA power output to know where you would be on the efficiency map based on how much power you want to make. Because the intersection of the airflow and the boost are going to intersect in some point on the efficiency island. The only way you can know where that intersection is to know how much airflow it is you have to know how much power the NA motor makes. So then you can determine, okay, if I want to make 800 horsepower, where does 800 horsepower intersect with how much boost? And if you're starting with 400, that intersection point is going to be different than if you were starting with 600 or 200, because it's going to take more boost at 200 than it does if you were making 600 NA. So you have to know all of that stuff before you can really choose the turbo. But the problem is, most of these turbos that we use, all of these offshore stuff, none of them have maps. So we wouldn't be looking at a map anyway. We would just be looking at, this is 1,000 horsepower turbo, so you should use this to make 1,000 horsepower. Will they let you grill and drink beer? I don't drink beer, but you could if you wanted after hours. Richard has an HO. I don't have an HOA. At 220 run to the garage just for that. Actually, the guy that owned this house before us was a pilot and also a fabricator, and he had a little shop built, kind of, that he used to do welding at. So he ran. I think there's 220 out there. I've heard it's extremely tough to avoid HOAs in California. That's a generalized statement that's not accurate. We don't have any of that. Why would you choose twin small turbos over a single big turbo? There really isn't a choice. Normally it's packaging. Sometimes guys like the symmetry of two turbos, especially if you have mirror image turbos like the Nelson Race or Nelson. That's right. Yeah, it's Nelson Racing. Or I think VS Racing also has some too. So some people like that. We like twins. Or a big single, because you can fit it somewhere. So they both will do the same thing. If you have two 500 horsepower turbos and you have one single 1,000 horsepower turbo, they essentially do the same thing. So there's one of those is not necessarily better than the other. Some of the small turbos are a lot smaller than the single big turbo. Yeah, you can, like I said, you can package stuff and fit things. But both of them will do what you want it to do. Do you know anyone that redesigns cathedral ports for super stock, like building up the bottoms of the intake ports to try to speed up velocity? I don't know, Dan, have you ever worked on any super stock stuff where they've changed the shape of the? Is that even legal in that class? A couple of 3076s, yeah, and those are, well, those would be sub 1,000 horsepower deals, I think. So, Dan, you were just sanding them, but not gapping them. The gap would, neither one of those is really that important, as long as it has gap. Change the shape of all the ports in super stock. What turbo would you recommend for a stock LS3? So the LS3 is stock, but you put aftermarket heads on it? That's interesting. It doesn't have a cam in it. And then Nate, you just have to pick the power level that you want. So you'd pick a different turbo for 700 horsepower than you would for 1,000 horsepower. Going from 16 twin 16Ts on my N54 to a single 66, 67. I lost low end torque, but made it up for it. It's hard to beat factory stuff for low speed response because they size them specifically to do that. And then going with a big single, I don't know what the flow rates are of the 16Ts though. I'm not too familiar with that turbo. But a 66 is pretty good size. You can make good power with that. So if you want 1,000 horsepower, put a VS Racing 78, 75 Gen 2 or an S475 on it, because that will make 1,000 horsepower. Yep, that's all. That's Nate. That's the way it is with anything. Just first thing you gotta do is pick your power output. Although I would greatly recommend a camshaft that you put in that and don't run the stock cam. It makes pretty good power with a stock cam. The way that we run an LS3 and a ported head, it could make 500 horsepower or 505 or so. So it'd be pretty easy still for you to make 1,000 horsepower. It'd take 15 or 16 pounds. But if you put a cam in it, when we put a cam in an LS3, an otherwise stock LS3, we made like 825 at 7 pounds. Does anybody make a ball bearing S475 at a decent price? There's got to be those, right? Nate, you don't need to be worried about efficiency. Stop worrying about the little things. You're trying to make 1,000 horsepower. The turbo will make 1,000 horsepower. You'll succeed in what you're doing. If you're trying to be more efficient, you need to put a cam in your motor. And you should also gap the rings. Big house. That's a good point. What did you use to resurface the 2.2 block? I think that they just did a block and like emery cloth or sanding paper or something. I think that that's what they, if I remember right. I bought the Felpro HS26 192 PT2 for my head replacement. Those aren't that thin. Multiple layer gaskets. Normally LS gaskets would be, if that's what you're talking about, normally LS gaskets would be 53 thousandths, or we have some that are 41. But the problem is if you have the piston 10 out of the hole, that only leaves you 30 thousandths piston to head clearance. And that's probably about where you would want to be. I don't think you'd want to be any less than that. Lots of projects are side checked by chasing minutia. Yeah, you just don't get caught up in the little things. Just set your goal. I want to make 1,000 horsepower. How do I do that? Well, I pick this 1,000 horsepower turbo, and away you go. Make sure it's intercooled to be better to run. Make sure your injectors are big enough and your pump is big enough. Ideally, you'd want to do it on E85 because that would be better. But if you get the range, you'll lose all the power and efficiency with blow by. Yes. I wish you could still get the VS Racing Gen 1. Are there none of those left? Very easy to package, and we put down 750 to 800 wheel horsepower. That's pretty good. What would 317 heads on a 4.8 do for a turbo build? It would lower the compression dramatically and make it soft in responding. It would still work. It just makes less power. And there's no need to put 317 heads on a 4.8. If you're trying to do a turbo build, you should just go get a 4.8 from the wrecking yard and put a small cam in it and springs and then injectors and then use the heads that are on there. The 706 or the 862 heads are going to work really well for that bore size and for that motor. And you'll be able to make the power that you want. Don't be swayed by, oh, the 317 heads flow more. That's not relevant for this discussion. I don't have a favorite version of Boost. I like the fact that there are lots of things to choose from. It's very important. Choices are the best thing that we have about our country, and choice is the best thing about Boost also. I had a Vortec on my Mustang that I just absolutely loved and drove it around everywhere and raced it in all kinds of races and had nothing but like fond memories and success. Turbo stuff is awesome. If I had a transmission for my truck and wanted to do force induction on it, I would put a roots blower or a twin screw blower on that. So all of that's good. I thought I remember you saying cam size isn't super important for a turbo. No, that's not totally accurate. What you want is, I always suggest putting a smaller cam in on a turbo application because the turbo is going to dictate how much power you make. If you run a camshaft that is a small camshaft that makes less peak power than a bigger camshaft does, let's say a 210 cam versus a 230 cam, the 230 cam is going to make more power. It may make 20 or 30 or 40 more horsepower, NA. But with either one of those cams and 1,000 horsepower turbo, you're only going to make 1,000 horsepower. One of them will allow you to do it at a slightly lower boost level, but you still can make 1,000 horsepower. The thing that the smaller cam will give you is better boost response, which is more important, especially on a bigger 1,000 horsepower turbo. Having more response is going to be better. So ultimately, that's what I normally recommend. I've never broken a stock crank, and we've made lots of power with them. Richard, thank you for your channel. I'd love to see a Hemi 4-cylinder engine, or at least a 1.6, 1.8 power outputs under boost. Like I don't have any small Hemis, and so you inspired me to turbo my Toyota 3TC. Those are cool. I have Honda stuff that we've tested up on the dyno, and have videos up on that. I'm sure somebody has broken a crank, but they haven't broken it because they put too much like cylinder pressure to it and broke it from power. They broke it from other stuff. Yeah, you just don't want it to get too close because there's some stretching going on, the movement going on. There's rocking of the piston, which changes the piston to head clearance, and 30 thousandths is a good amount for quench. That's all safe. I'd rather not get that close and have it be safe. Is the stock LS3 cam considered a big cam? No, it's considered a small cam. James, what Philpro head gaskets are for an LQ4 are 40 to 45 thousandths? We have some that are 41 and we have some that are 53. Philpro makes both of those. They're the same part number, and the part number is based on the bore size, and then you can get that bore size in two different thicknesses. I'm just trying to find something to do with the 317 heads from my LQ4. You can. I wouldn't recommend putting them on a 4.8. It's going to be really, really soft if you do that. A stock cam works. You can run a stock cam with boost also. You can run any cam with boost. How much quicker would a 202 cam spool turbo in comparison to a 220 cam? I don't know. We'd have to look at the low speed power and see what's going on in a comparison between those two. Ever use nitrous to spool turbo? Yes, that works really well. Nate, you you can swap your cam. If you put even a small cam in to replace your stock LS3 cam, you will get more power. Okay. And you can pick up power with the right cam in an LS3. You can pick up power down low, which is where you want it, and up top. Take a look at all of the LS3 cam videos that I have up, and you can see what kind of cams I'm talking about. You just don't need a big cam. You don't need a cam that's 230 degrees of duration at 50. For that, you need something like a Truck Norris cam would actually be fairly good for that. Can you use dye to find boost leaks? We normally pressurize it. We take and use an air hose, and then we have a coupler that goes over the turbo, and then we pressurize the turbo and look for leaks or listen for leaks in the turbo cold side and in the intercooler and intake manifold. What is the longevity of something like a Truck Norris cam? The cam is not going to wear out if that's what you're worried about. It should last indefinitely, just like a stock cam does. Smoke machines also work. Do you think I should get a cam even smaller than the stock LS3? No, you shouldn't. AFR says use a GM LS2 head gasket, but isn't that too thick? They say use that for what? The gaskets that we use for boost are usually the LS9 head gaskets. Nate, there's nothing to be confused about. You want to make 1,000 horsepower. You can do it with your stock cam, or you can do it with another smaller cam. Not smaller than the LS3, but a small cam relative to a big cam. If you would like me just to tell you which cam to use, you need to use a Truck Norris cam. Put a Truck Norris cam in, put springs in, and put the turbo on. Or just keep the cam that you have and see what happens. I'm doing a Turbo Coyote and a new edge. Packaging is tight, and I have to start with 3-inch down pipe. Will it be beneficial to step down pipe up from 3 inches to 4 inches after a few feet? Yes, it will be. And make sure that you gap the rings. Can you dyno an LS with a quadrajet? We'd probably have to use an adapter because I don't think any of the manifolds, any of the carbureted manifolds set up to accept a quadrajet. I don't think that they are. Okay, we are going to close out our poll at 73% saying no, you don't need a big cam. Or does a big cam require high compression? It does not. One minute. Who's going to get the last question? I have to go get Milo. Has anybody tried Data Advisor's polyquad technique for 4-valve heads? I don't know what that is. They do make square bore spread adapters. Yeah, we have those already. That's what I'm saying. We would need to do that, but I didn't think any of the manifolds had provisions to mount a quadrajet on already the way the manifold comes. The other thing is I did talk to Dave Vizard yesterday, and he's trying to finish up the valve job. Obviously, his health is not great. I told him, look, you don't have to worry about it. I said, just the fact that you're doing this stuff is awesome. I don't even need to have the head. I'm more concerned about you and your health than I am about a 2.2 Chrysler head. We're going to have other ported ones too, so it doesn't matter. But he wants to finish it, and then he is suggesting also that we coat the valves, the thermal barrier coat the valves, and I think the chamber and the ports. He said that the head will last longer if we coat the ports, which might be the case. But he's talking about longevity and 50 pounds, and none of that stuff is what's going to happen with this motor. It's not going to run 50 pounds of boost. I have a 455 Buick trying to turbo it. What website can help me get all the stuff, please? I don't know what website is going to give you turbo 455 Buick stuff, but I have a video up on turboing it. It's pretty easy to do. We just use stock exhaust manifolds, routed exhaust from those to a single turbo, and then fed a blow-through carburetor. So it's not terribly difficult. Apparently, the polyquad technique uses staggered valve sizes to promote swirl. You could do it like Honda did on the camshaft and just open one valve before the other. He does. His stories do last a long time, but he's fantastic. Thank you guys all for showing up. Morning motivation. Go get your projects done. I'm gonna go work on another video, and then I will see you all tonight. Milo.